Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Good to be with you all. Chewy, kia ora, sir.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you doing?
You doing well?
I'm doing okay.
Rocking and rolling?
Yeah.
All right. All right. How's your weekend? Good times had by one and all?
I saw the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Did you do the tunnel walk?
No, because I work on Sundays. You were thinking of doing that though, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm my physicalness to do with 2 weeks ago today, me being in hospital, is not quite there, so I wasn't gonna.
Got it.
I'm mostly there, but there was which if people who don't know in Dunedin, there was a tunnel that opened up sort of through a mountain, because that's typically where tunnels are, which used to be a rail tunnel, but they've opened it up as sort of part of the cycleway or something, and it's like 4 kilometers long or some crazy thing. They opened up for pedestrians to check out over the weekend, and no, I didn't get there unfortunately, but looks like fun.
A couple of my friends did. Photos looked very much like a tunnel. So did what it said on the box.
I've got something fun to show you to start the show off with tonight, Chewy. You may have already seen this, other people may have already seen this, but our friend of the show, Calvin Morgan, has put up a video today of some of the banter going on outside the Julian Bachelor latest Julian Bachelor speech, with a bunch of people trying to get in and not being allowed to. And you listen to this carefully. It's only about 90 seconds long. And you listen to it carefully, the guy going, no, they're not all Pākehā inside. Some of them have a little bit of Maori in them. It was quite amusing. I'm not sure who this guy is taking the piss, but he's hilariously trying to get in. Enjoy this, people.
Excuse me, it's right if I come in. I'm with the colonisers. Can I come in? God save the king. Long live the British Empire. So I can come in? No. God save the king. Long live the British Empire. You're here for no good. Thanks a lot. I'll come in. No, you aren't. You're not welcome, please leave. Private property. They're not letting me in. I even brought a Union Jack. They're not letting me in. God save the king, long live the British Empire.
Don't rush the door.
I love colonisation, it's my favourite. Let me in.
Everyone in there is Pākehā, and you want to shut us up.
They're not all Pākehā. Some have got a little bit of Maori.
Hey mate, I served in the Royal New Zealand Navy.
Yes,
yeah, so I'm a matlow, so I can come in.
Sorry, you're a troublemaker. Go away.
But I'm a coloniser.
You want to make trouble, that's all you're here for. Now just go.
They're going to come at me any moment.
They're well behaved.
Can I go in there and be safe?
They're just trying to cause problems.
Why didn't you let me in to be safe from those lot?
Because you came with this.
They're going to come at me any minute now.
Fine, they can come at you.
The fuck is same colour as you, and he hates us more already.
And I only found out 2 weeks ago I wasn't.
It's just comedy can just make things. You know what I mean? You can make your way. This is the best bit. Look, try and sneak in.
You've got Maori health system, okay? And you've got Maori wards and councils.
Tried to sneak in, he won't let me in.
It's almost like old mate doesn't know what country he lives in.
I think it's quite bizarre that all the people that have been left outside have a darker skin pigmentation than the people inside. I think that might be a coincidence.
That's very, very funny. If you're listening to the audio podcast, you may not quite have heard all of that, but go have a look on it. Or just look up Calvin Morgan's Twitter feed. It's very, very funny. I like it how he goes, is everyone left outside has a darker skin pigment? I think that might be a coincidence. So, yes, we enjoyed that a lot. I thought I had to share that this morning. It's very, very good. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. I got I was going to say a fun show. It depends how you think about the context of the word fun. We've got a show for you tonight. We're going to be talking in a sec to Grant Duncan, from Massey University about the left losing, which we've talked about a bit recently, a lot actually, not just about this election, but how the left and right do politics and what's happening at the moment with Grant's observations. We're also going to talk about the Reid Research poll with Newshub last night. Good news for the Maori Party, terrible news, particularly for Mr. Luxon, and not particularly good news for National or Labour. Like average news for National and Labour, but bad news for Luxon. And also, the National Party today thought they'd come out swinging, and they've said, oh, you know, we're going to give everyone a receipt of where their tax money is being spent. That'll get us into office, won't it? Everyone will get a receipt. And then, of course, when they were questioned about could we have a receipt for how much this would cost to implement, they didn't have that.
No, of course.
So there's no costings done, and of course, the National Party, who has been going on and on and on and on and on and on and on about getting rid of bureaucracy and bureaucrats, are going to have to get themselves a whole new department of IRD to actually fix up this and make it all work for them. So, but everyone will be able to look directly on a piece of paper delivered to their letterbox as to where the tax money has gone. What they could do, of course, right now is go to MIRD, and they could see that for themselves because it's already all there. But National want to give us a piece of paper each, including a 14-year-old, newspaper delivery person where their tax money is being spent, everyone. But, that's the kind of inspirational politics that'll get someone elected, I reckon, Chewy. What do you reckon?
So I wonder if he knows that you can kind of already do that. You can do it yourself.
Yep.
You can literally go to budget.govt.nz.
Yep.
And search for core Crown expense tables.
Yeah.
It's riveting. Like, it's definitely a party trick you want to keep for when you got friends around. But you can literally bring up all of that information sorted by year and where all your tax gone. Not you personally.
Yeah, but you've ruined it, Chewy. I mean, you've just blown out of it. But this is like a core policy from National, and you've taken all the wind out of their sails. How dare you?
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't even have to use what was Nicola Willis talking about? Robots or AI or something?
Anyway. All right, let's get on to the night, shall we? I want to welcome to the show to start off with from Massey University, Associate Professor from the School of People, Environment and Planning. It's Associate Professor Grant Duncan. Grant, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Good to be with
Grant.
you. And I'm sure you're enthralled about getting a receipt every year from a national government telling you where the tax money is going to be spent. So, hooray!
I'm one of those
Take my receipt from the
people who
supermarket.
So I really, budget at a glance document. They put it out every year. That's the place to look.
Now, for people who want to anchor you, Grant, we reference you quite a lot on this show because you're probably the person who pulled us over the coals a little bit for taking too much notice about projected results to election day and how much we don't now look at, this is what it would look like in the House. We do look at polls and we do look at what it is for day, but we need to probably give you credit for the person who kind of dragged us away from taking too much attention to what this would project. In fact, what did we have last week, Chewy? There was the Curio Taxpayers Union poll. Basically, the headline read that we now didn't need an election because they were telling us that National and ACT could get there by themselves. And we thought that was good because that will save us a lot of time and money just to cancel the election and let the Taxpayers Union tell us that.
Back.
Yeah, it's a good thing. So that just to anchor you for our audience as to we reference you quite a bit. Certainly we reference your idea around that quite a bit and we've taken it on board. So thank you, sir, for adding to our show.
Glad to be helpful.
Now, let's have a look at this, shall we? Let's start with a Substack that you have written. Now, if people want to read this for themselves, there is actually a link in the description, I think, on all of our places we're broadcasting right now. So whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or maybe not on Twitter, but on the other two, there's a link to your story to go and check it out. You've written a piece this morning simply titled, How Do the Left Lose? I will read out one little paragraph and then I want to throw it to you, Grant. This is a conversation that we've had quite a lot here, and let's flesh it out a bit. You've said this: as with the defence of free speech, however, the baton of civil rights has now been passed from left to right. Why have the left given their hard-won prizes away to their opponents to own and defend? It's like giving away one's savings to the employer who paid the minimum wage. So let's have a look at this, and let's have I guess the open-ended question to ask with is, you can just tell us from your thoughts, your writings, your meanderings, how do the left lose, in your opinion?
well, they fight one another. That's how they lose, and they accuse one another of things. And I mean, people do behave badly sometimes. People do say rude things, or look, I'm an academic. I do my best not to offend anyone, but um, you know, I am conscious of I use my free speech, but I'm conscious as an academic with academic freedom, using that freedom responsibly. But you just never know when something that you say might come across wrong to someone, and I think it is okay for us to register objections, to say, hey, I don't think that's right. But I think one of the problems that's happening in the left at the moment is the virulence of accusations against people for supposedly offending others. And so, as I say, it's okay to call people out, but I just think tone it down a little bit. That would be, showing a bit of self-discipline, because the way that the left will lose this election, well, not the only way, but one of the ways in which they'll lose this election is by carrying on with the infighting that we've seen recently.
Let me bring an example to you of what you're saying, because I reckon there's a jump the shark moment as well. And I think the jump the shark moment of attacking one's own happened last week with Elizabeth Kerekere. I want to play you a clip, it's only 15 seconds, because Elizabeth Kerekere, as a part of her defense of herself and the accusations of bullying, decided she would go on attack by claiming that there was racism issues within the Green Party.
Oh, definitely a racism problem in the Greens. All of the work that I have done around helping restructure the party and focus on how we give life to Te Tiriti. I think a lot of our supporters will be really disappointed.
So is that a concrete example of what you've just talked about, how the left attacks itself? Now, I know Elizabeth Kerekere is kind of defending herself because she's been going through some stuff, but I know Chewie and I have experienced it in this show and others that the other thing that happened with Ms. Kerekere is the reports that were coming out about her bullying says that I guess I'll say the accusation from within is that she does throw that kind of label around a lot. In other words, it seems that what happens is the accusation of you being a bad person is more so than the content of the argument we're having amongst ourselves. Is that sort of an example of what you're talking about?
Well, it's an example, and whilst I wouldn't want to stop Elizabeth from saying what she's saying, I would question why she's saying it in the media. And secondly, the other remarkable event was, of course, I think the other Saturday morning when James and Marama had to be cross-examined by the press about that whole investigation. Now, politically, that is a colossal waste of time. That is the Green Party's co-leaders talking to the media about internal squabbles rather than talking about climate change, rather than talking about what they would like to be doing if they were sitting at the cabinet table after the next election, and therefore taking away from their impact on the next election. So, I mean, it's not for me to say who was right and wrong in that whole argument, really, because I wasn't there. I'm not a Green Party member. I wasn't in the room when those things happened. But all I'm saying is that that kind of accusation made public is bad for the electoral prospects of any political party. It reminds me a little bit, and I'm still not quite sure whether I believe this, honestly, but I remember hearing that apparently, I'm still shaking my head in disbelief, but I heard that a lot of left-wing NGOs and lobby groups in Washington, D.C. nowadays, their management is spending most of their time dealing with internal complaints of one staff member against another and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And so a lot of wasted energy goes on in left-wing organizations as people deal with and investigate. And it takes time. If a person lodges a complaint, I've had one against me in the past. I know what it's like. You guys, it sounds like you've had them too. When people lodge complaints, it takes time to deal with these things properly. It is wasted effort. It distracts from your political objectives. And of course, it costs your organization money that you could be, and time that you could be spending on something more productive.
The reason I reference this as a jump the shark moment as well is, I mean, as you say, we weren't there, we don't know the full truth, but if you were to list off all the political parties and statistically put, where do you think racism is going to be active? I think the Greens would be at the bottom of the list. And I feel like that Elizabeth Kirikiri's comments have got no traction. And I wonder if that's because everyone can kind of go, look, it's okay if you're angry or upset or but and look, we're not really going to buy into that, at least that argument. It feels pretty unlikely that party would be the place for. I was going to say as well, Grant, you're right about when we have complaints that we have, but we've got a new system. I can show you our new system for complaints here, Chewy. It's this. This is our new system for complaints. They go in here. So from now on, our complaint system is pretty streamlined, wouldn't you say, Chewy?
That's new. I assume you bought that over the weekend.
Any thoughts you want to take up there, Chewy? Yeah, they're easy. You just do this, and then you do that. It's harder to do this, so if it's on Twitter, you've got to kind of crush the screen. It's a bit more difficult to screw it up. But what are your thoughts, Chewy?
I mean, my thoughts with Elizabeth's comments there is obviously, famously, the Green Party seems to be a hive of racism. But then I thought, well, hang on. There is also there's a lot of white lefties and a lot of white greenies, and there's also a lot of performative behavior in those groups of like, of course we follow the treaty, of course that's not even up for debate. But so I wonder if it's that sort of aspect that she's speaking to. Again, I'm not part of the Green Party. I haven't been privy to any of these meetings or anything like that. I would love to know what examples and what people she's talking about, but obviously we're not probably not going to hear about that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I agree. It's there's a lot of energy. I mean, this story would have died on the vine if the Greens behaved like any other party and went, it's internal, move on.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about our policy that we're bringing?
Yeah, it shouldn't be in the news, and we shouldn't be talking about it now. It should have been kept internal.
Yeah.
Back to your article. Let's have a look at another party article. This is what you say. In left social movements today, and I guess that's like whether it's an NGO, if you just spoke about, or a political party, the principal aim seems to be preemptive accusation against somebody, supposedly offending somebody else. You know, we see that a lot in the media. Like someone will take umbrage for something that someone, let's just pick a comedian out of the, but someone will take umbrage for something the comedian has said about another group of people when they're not part of that group of people, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but that's what I think of when I read what you've written there, against somebody supposedly offending somebody else. And hence the prominent gesture is the pointed finger. The pervasive effect then is fear, the fear of being accused and cancelled. To avoid being cancelled, one accuses the other first. So before you can get me, I'm going to fucking get you. That's the game we're playing. If this is the best that the political left now hopes for, it may be because they've lost hope for collective action and a better future. Can you expand on that, what you mean by that?
Oh, I think Barack Obama put it nicely, didn't he, when he talked about the circular firing squad, where the left forms a circular firing squad and they shoot at one another. They lose sight of the target. Now, I'm not denying that people sometimes say offensive things. That happens, and we can deal with that like adults. I think, well, we ought to be able to, and debate things openly. It's not about silencing people. I think all I'm saying really in there is that I think that the left has lost sight of the goals, and that's why I reintroduced a little bit of history there about the struggles for a universal suffrage, for social security, the huge scrap that we had to defeat fascism in the 1940s. I mean, real fascism as opposed to, finger pointing, you're a fascist, real world fascism, all right? And the efforts that people went to, ultimately partly in defense of the principle of one person, one vote, and free competitive elections, and of course, the civil right to express ourselves politically, to disagree with one another, as well as to express dissenting opinions. The right to dissent, the right to freedom of speech, fundamentally was a left-wing cause originally. Civil disobedience, dissent, the struggle against the manufacturing of consent in the big corporate media and so forth, and the political clobbering machine and so forth. Those were left-wing objectives. Now what's happened is that those left-wing prizes, so to speak, have been handed over to be defended, to be owned and defended by the right. One person, one vote. I know very well that it's been associated with the Hobson's Pledge group and things like that. I get that point, and I think that's what Te Pati Maori was saying when they objected to the principle of one person, one vote. But it's forgetting the struggle that went on, the long historical left-wing struggle that went on to achieve that as a principle of political equality, to end discrimination, to put an end to government by a landed minority. And we just, forgetting that history and forgetting those kinds of bigger objectives that the left wing ought to be fighting on behalf of the people in terms of, say, social security, housing, environment, all of those questions get lost when people start pointing fingers at one another, slamming doors, walking out on one another, and making a scene in public about it. It's one thing to have arguments, another thing to let those arguments become public, and they then become the story about your party.
I can give you a real concrete example of that. It's not in New Zealand, but the ACLU in America, massively left-wing political party, but were very much about freedom of speech first and foremost. Like, they were the defenders of the freedom of speech. I've actually done a podcast with a guy called David, I think it was David Goldberger. David Goldberger was a lawyer in 1967 who represented the Nazis against, or was it 78? Oh, it was 78. The Nazi group that wanted to march through Chicago. Jewish, left-wing lawyer defending the Nazis on their free speech with the ACLU, primarily left-wing organisation, but just the concrete version of freedom of speech. Within the last couple of years, and this is one of the reasons I spoke to David, he's kind of come out denouncing the ACLU, because what they're doing now is they're picking and choosing what they can defend when it comes to free speech. And for example, I remember the conversation we had, and if people want to look it up, they can find it on my DOC podcast, is he was talking about, issues would come into the ACLU about, Trump, and they wouldn't take those cases. But they'd come in about some progressive left-wing, and they would take those cases. So this left-wing organisation has moved away from being free speech purists, and as you say, has handed it to the right, who are now the people who are able to say what you want. Yes, you're offended. Yes, I hate your speech, but say what you want. It really has flipped. It's a sad day, actually. It's a sad indictment of the political left in general, I think.
That's right. In a weird way, if you took this to the extreme, and I'm not saying this will happen, but if you took it to the extreme, the left would more or less be asking for some kind of Stalinist ruler who would take those accused of offending someone out the back and just shoot them, eliminate them that way. And so there has always been an element on the left that is quite authoritarian, a sort of centralizing version of so-called democracy. But the kind of democracy that I think works for us and works for other people around the world, and which we really have to defend these days, does depend on political equality and freedom of speech. And when I say political equality, we have a fairly good system in New Zealand now with proportional representation, where everyone's vote pretty much has a close to equal weighting in the final results.
Yeah. Look, the last part of your article talks about where to from here, what the left needs to do. I'll ask you this before, and I said this before we came on air. Since I've been working in media, right? So this is 2000, right? Late 90s, early 2000s, when I started to get into news and current affairs world. I've said that in the Western world, the world over, the right does politics better than the left. The right speaks with one voice, even if it's a horrible voice, like you see the Ted Cruz's of this world not wanting to support Trump, but they get in lockstep behind him. So they do politics. When I say better, I'm not using that word meaning better as in better for us, but they play the game better and they play by their political rules better. The left have always seemed to me to be more fractured. And again, looking into America, because Bernie didn't get in, a whole bunch of the Bernie voters went, fuck you all, we're not voting for anybody. So the left in general don't seem to want to get in line with the left. They seem to want to get in line with their party, so it's more fractured. And I firmly believe, and if you have a look at the votes in most Western countries, that more people tend to vote for the left, but because it's fractured, it's one of the things that keeps the left versus right continuum more 50-50. Like if you look at the popular vote in America, the left should have won all bar one of the last, since 1992, since all of those elections. Now they've got a different system, but the idea of the right doing politics better and the left being more fractured, does that sort of line up with what you're saying as well? Because what I hear you doing is talking about they infighting and that speaks to me of the fracture. Is that a similar sort of thought we're going through?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's generally a little bit more sort of discipline, and as you say, sticking together in right-wing parties. I guess you could say that one of the sort of joyful sides of the left is that there is more debate, more argument, a bit more fractiousness, and that's okay. But I think lately it's the kind of venomousness of some of these accusations that I think is kind of scary. It's gone to another level where I guess people want to launch accusations with a certain kind of vigor that is really unnecessary. It's not achieving anything. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, is that, we know also from quite a lot of research that to a large extent, the preferences of people on lower incomes aren't really sort of filtering through or being met in terms of actual policies of governments, real world policies. The preferences of higher income people tend more frequently to be actually put into action or met in real world policy making. And so the other reason, of course, there's other reasons why the left are up against it. People on lower incomes are less likely to vote. And of course, it's harder to get campaign finance from people on lower incomes as well. And we can see that in some of the campaign finance figures just lately, for instance. So there's a number of reasons why I think left-wing parties are struggling. But I guess my suggestion simply in that article is don't make it worse for yourself by publicly infighting and making the news cycle focus on your accusations against one another. Or I think, for instance, we're making up false allegations about how the principle of one person, one vote is racist simply because Hobson's pledge was using it.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I say, so that's the metric. We've talked about this before, and I think I might have talked about it with you, Grant. But that Antifa rally that I've talked about numerous times in America with the two old people holding the American flag as Antifa went past, and Antifa guys were all screaming racist, racist, racist. And my position was, well, that old couple might be racist. We don't know, but the metric to decide that is not holding an American flag. That's not the metric to decide whether they are or aren't. So screaming it out like that seems to be pointless. Hey, Chewy, I've got one more question about this year, but do you want to jump in with anything as well?
Yeah, look, I think a big problem, this isn't so much, I guess, with our political parties and that thing. I think part of the Greens' problem was that they want to really stick to those core tenets of being a transparent party. It was the same with the leadership debate and all of that sort of thing, is that they wanted to see that their processes were open and everybody could see. And that's so different from every other party, which is like, no, you can't see the machinery of what we do, that it sticks out. And then when Elizabeth's gone, she's come out swinging, and she's come out with accusations that no one really expected. I think that, when we've seen other leadership struggles or Sharma's, not a leadership struggle, but a bit of intra-party drama. We've got Sharma, we've got Nationals struggles and that sort of thing. And it's gossipy, bitchy stuff that plays really, really well in the news. But then when we're talking about, I guess, in the left generally, I think one of the biggest problems that the left have is the assumption that everybody is at the same point of the journey. And there's almost a performative aspect of it to say, I'm the most enlightened one. I've got all of my ducks in a row, and this person doesn't and must be shunned.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Yeah. I think we need to. I mean, I'm a teacher, so I kind of get that not everyone's at the same stage of the learning curve, including myself. And so I would hope that if I screw up and say something that someone thinks is off key, that they'd have a little bit of toleration when they correct me, just as I would do for my students. Because occasionally students say off key things in class. It's incumbent on me to find kind ways of pointing it out and shifting the conversation in a different direction. And honestly, occasionally I do get some jaw droppers that I have to deal with. On both the left and the right, get some sort of interesting comments come out in class. I've got to find a way to contain what that person has said without humiliating them in front of the other students, and yet also showing that I'm trying to correct things. Can be quite difficult to do in the moment, so to speak. But it's a difficult thing to do. But we have to find ways of, just as you said, understanding that we're at different stages in a learning process. So if someone says something that doesn't seem to be up with the play in terms of where the current left-wing thinking is about this or that, please just extend them a little bit of toleration and care, and try to help them along that journey in a gentle sort of way, understanding that we don't all understand things equally.
But it's not even just though understanding, because understanding implies that the enlightened person has the correct answer. When we figure out this along the way, and there's lots of things that we're figuring out, and one of the things that's hardest is in this journey of figuring shit out, someone taking authority position of absolute truth does nothing but cause conflict, because we're traveling through this universe together at the moment, figuring things out. And when we get to the end of the part of the journey for this bit that we're figuring out, we'll then know. But people talking in absolutes now about stuff that we're still figuring out, that's sort of what I hear. And I'm not necessarily saying it's for the left. We can say it's for anybody. That's what I hear as one of the big hurdles, because then, of course, when they put themselves up as the expert and they have gospel truth, they can then point to the other person using the finger and going, wrong, you're an XYZ phobe, whatever it is, or you're a XYZ bigot, or whatever the thing is. And as Chewie was saying, I'm the enlightened one. But the truth is, these people often speak of a world in black and white. And I hate to inform them this, but we pretty much live in shades of greys, and probably, I don't know, I won't put a percentage on it, but I'll just say most of our society is in the shades of grey. So absolutes are a pretty tough thing to handle, especially from people who are on the journey to finding if that truth is 100% right or partly right or wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying there, Pat. And what you just illustrated too is that thing where that virulent accusation is behind it. What I'm saying is that behind it, I have to accuse you before I get accused.
Yeah, exactly.
You see, that's why I say it's preemptive accusation, because I'm afraid of being cancelled. Therefore, I'm going to come out in front and do that accusation in front of everybody, so everyone can see that I'm onto it. But this is, as I say, this is kind of intoleration, but also it's, I think, fundamentally a waste of energy, honestly.
The last thing you write in your article, and we can wrap up with this because it'll be good to get your take on it, is basically where to from here. Meanwhile, all that the left as a whole need to do in order to lose this election is to carry on infighting. You say, what then might a pathway forward look like? Left MPs need to recall their history and remember that they were elected to and get paid to work for the people and the planet. They could apply at least a modicum of self-discipline and stop the finger pointing and door slamming. I think the thing I love about this paragraph is this bit about working for the people. And I hear that every politician gets paid by the people, but the left seem to have lost that idea of they were originally the party of the factory floor. And those people are, when you say recall their history, is what I think of when I hear the history. Like when Christopher Luxon came out in the last 6 months talking about the CEOs don't like Labor. Here on the show, we said, good, Labor, grab that. And you can say to National, you guys can have the CEOs and we'll have the factory floor workers. Like they could have actually used that as a way to, as you say, recall their history. Anything else you can expand on for that kind of idea around what the left would need to do, in your opinion, in this upcoming election to kind of get over the line?
Well, I guess perhaps I could have added there that actually we're only looking at a minority of left MPs who've caused all of these ructions. Most of them are actually, I think, being quite disciplined. I probably should have added that in. But I've just finished writing a column on the coming budget for the conversation that'll come out in the morning. And so, I'm actually quite disappointed. This emphasis on, we're going to do the basics for the East Coast rather than build back better, just the basics. and the budget is going to be all no frills. Now, this terminology, basic and no frills, sounds to me like the lowest possible level of aspiration that you can have. I would almost go so far as to say that these are code words for austerity budget. We'll have to wait and see what it actually contains. But I just find this incredibly disappointing. And you can see that the thing that bugged me was the way that columnists in the media just picked up on this and just repeated this phrase, no frills, over and over again as become the mantra. And people are just swallowing it and accepting it, not saying, excuse me, can we have some bold ideas? Can we have some vision for the future, please, especially from a Labour Party? Can we talk about building a better nation or something, rather than just this really no ambition, no frills, absolute basics? That's all you're getting. And I'm just wondering what some of those, sort of basic rebuilt bridges in Hawke's Bay are going to look like. Are they going to be, why aren't we using this as an opportunity to improve that infrastructure? Future-proof it.
I think you've also just vocalised the frustration of many of us for the whole last term. A Labour government that had a majority and could have done anything, could have been transformative. I mean, yes, you can look to point to COVID and say it was more difficult, but they still could have done stuff and they've chosen not to. And now they've come out the back of it. They feel like they have to be bland near the middle to try and get back in again. But I'm with you because COVID for them ended badly. They've now got nothing to hang their hats on to say, look at what we did, because they've been milquetoast. They've done. I mean, look, let's get me wrong. They've done very well with COVID overall. No, I don't actually many complaints here, but because that's the one thing that many on the right have picked up to use against them, they have nothing else to then hang their hat on and say, but what about this and what about this and what about this? Because they haven't used that majority. So I hear you, Grant.
Well, no, that is a squandered opportunity. And I mean, Robertson has been talking, and Hipkins have been talking a lot about skills and education in the coming budget. But when you look at what they've done, all they've done in tertiary education, for instance, was to amalgamate polytechs. And that really is a rolling disaster from what I can tell. They've done nothing for universities. We're looking at, mass layoffs at AUT, Otago. Before long, it'll be Massey. And so, they've done nothing for us. Once again, no aspiration. We're living in an age where we're about to enter an era which is going to be run by artificial intelligence. We're not really doing anything. We're not using our tertiary education system to say, hey, how are we going to get on top of this? How are we going to sort of join some of this innovation? But also, how are we going to explore what it will mean to be human, what it will mean to be a good society in this new world that we're going into? We really need to be doing something about that. I don't hear this government saying anything about it. I don't actually hear our vice chancellors talking about it really very much. All they're doing is worrying about the effect of ChatGPT on cheating. No one's really asking these questions.
Yeah,
the obvious questions.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, look, Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. Associate Professor Grant Duncan from Massey University, the School of People, Environment and Planning. As we said in the link for this video, you'll get the link to the Substack. We love having you on, Grant, and you're welcome back anytime.
Great.
I'm sure we'll talk again super soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your time, mate.
All right, all the best.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at some of the chats that have been coming in during that. I know that there's three things we've talked about, so let's just try and get the ones that are about this. The left-wing camp needs to increase its support base among a lot of people. Okay. I mean, I know I reference America a lot, but the reason I reference America is it's the one place you can look at the popular vote, sorry. And I think the support base is there. I think probably what I would say is they need to engage the support base. So I think like what Grant is saying, low income are less likely to vote. I think if you actually pinned everybody down and asked where they were going to vote, the left wins every time. But the right do politics better, and that's what keeps it close. I mean, I'll stand by that.
Yeah, I mean, an election is a numbers thing, right? So look at the numbers. Where are most of your votes? It is middle income down, basically. Yeah. The pyramid gets less and less as you go further up. I mean, we were talking last week about tax. I think in the middle of a cost of living crisis, I think when people are talking about how expensive things are and how people need better pay and better options to feed and clothe themselves and that sort of thing, that's what we should be talking about. I don't want to hear no frills. People don't want to hear no frills. They see enough no frills when they go to the supermarket now. You know,
part of it will be that idea of trying to not spook the. What do you spook? Spook the horses? Is that what you spook? You know, you scare the horses, make them bolt?
Yeah, you can spook the horses, but I don't see why. Why is it not? Hey, look, this budget is going to be about making things easier for you because we know that times are tough. That's a different message.
I wonder if
that's a different message.
If they also
entirely.
Imagine Labor and the Greens lose this election and it's a right block in. They could put stuff in the budget this year that their National would have to do next year. So there's that side of it as well. If they wanted to do something a bit more transformative, they're going to put it in place for costing out and being implemented from next year. Then it gets implemented. So that's the other way to look at it. Maybe it sounds a bit defeatist, but they could put stuff into the future today, even if they weren't going to be there. That would be inspirational, or you know.
I mean,
something that you can hang
I
your hat
saw a
on.
clip today of Luxon talking to some group, and he says, "Oh, there's been an increase for superannuitants. There's been an increase in this, that, and the other thing. All good stuff. It's all good stuff that he said that he hated at the time, but is acknowledging in front of other people that it's good stuff. You know, it's like why aren't we looking at, you know, on this show we've talked about." You know, increasing the amount of income that is tax-free, changing the tax brackets.
Yep.
We've talked about, hey, look, maybe we want to lower tax and raise it further up so everybody's paying more of a fair share. That's big, bold, transformative, brave stuff. But they're avoiding it because they know the criticism is going to come like a whip crack. See, they're fucking with tax. Labor's coming for your tax money.
Yeah, but that would work. This is the
you've
thing.
Got an answer for that. We're not coming for the tax money from the majority of you.
That's what I'm saying. It seems that
the majority.
It would be really interesting to talk to Chippy and go, why won't you do that? Because we've already done these numbers, and we did our numbers based on the Australian model, and anyone under $80,000 based on using the Australian numbers would be better off, and anyone over $80,000 would pay a little bit more incrementally. You know, like if you're on $85,000, you might pay an extra $50 a year, so a little bit more.
The wealth tax that the Greens were talking about, which was kicking in at $150,000 of income per person. Now you go, is that you? Are you worried about the tax? The extra 1% tax because you earn $150,000 a year? Do you know anyone that earns $150,000 a year? I sure as fuck don't.
Do you know what part of it probably is, Chewy? And I know this is research out of America, is that Americans aspire to be rich and wealthy.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so
everybody in America is a frustrated millionaire.
They go, when I get there, I don't want to be paying that tax. And so I don't want those guys who are there now to be paying it. I wonder if there's any, I don't know if there's any mindset for that within New Zealand as well.
Yeah. Now, and also the other point I want to make is when we talk about lower incomes don't tend to vote, they also don't tend to have the access to inform policy or the time to fill out submissions or that sort of thing. The very machinery of our government is not is not targeted, is not accessible by lower income people. You know, so of course the ideas that they might have of how to make their lives better don't filter through. They come from think tanks and they come from people further up the chain of like, well, I've got this economic theory, let's give it a whirl. You know, and if they get it wrong, then it's mass job layoffs in a recession. And if they get it right, then people make a whole bunch of fucking money, and it's still the people at the bottom just doing what they always do, which is pay all of their tax and spend all of their money.
I am thinking about the idea of putting something in place at this budget that would then have to be carried out next year, no matter who was in it. Reminds me of the Dunedin mayoralty conversations we had. All of the Dunedin mayors, basically bar the one who was incumbent when I talked to them, were anti the idea of what they were doing in Dunedin and George Street, which is one of our main roads that goes into the Octagon from one side, becoming a one-way. Yet I noticed that when the first section of that one-way, the incumbent, the new mayor, who was very anti the idea when he was talking to the public, was out there cracking champagne and being all proud of this new thing that was put out there as well. So
yeah.
If you thought about it like that, gave Labor the freedom to do whatever they wanted to in this budget, which they're not going to do, even if they got criticism for it and it was better for the population, for the citizens. Probably next year, if it's a popular thing they put in Nationalist government, Luxon would be there with the champagne going, I now dub the opening, whatever the fucking thing was. So
yeah, I think if we could use that incredibly niche regional reference that we're fallen into now, talking about Dunedin's Main Street redo, right?
Yep.
So I think we can expand this out to bigger topics, right? So what they planned to do with the main street was really well communicated. They put out glossy brochures. They asked for public submissions. There were meetings. There were all, this, that, and the other thing. They were planning it for fucking a decade.
Yeah.
And then the moment a shovel hit the ground and the barriers went up, everybody lost their mind. And because there was an election up, and people went, oh, here's a way to get some votes, right? So there was bitching and sniping and all the way through the election. The mayor lost. We got a new mayor, and the new mayor opened the road that he was apparently against.
And potentially, from memory, because I talked to them all, he might have been one of the guys, and I'll have to check this, who said that he'd pull it all up. He might have been. There was a couple of them that said he'd pull it all up.
On it. Yeah. He wanted to check about turning it back into two-way. But as soon as people could physically see what had been achieved with that one block, the criticism died on the vine.
Now let's bring that.
Problem.
Let's open that up.
Policy.
So let's talk about that.
Policy. You can talk about what you're going to achieve. You can show people the planning, all the working, all the focus group info. People won't appreciate it until it's running.
Yep. So what would happen is then
just do it.
You'd have Christopher Luxon. You'd have all those, groundswell mayors that got in. I don't know if there was any. Then you'd have all them at the ribbon cutting of the new Three Waters infrastructure when it happened, but they all used it to help themselves get elected in the build up to it. That's what you're saying. Let's have a look at some more of the comments. Josie's saying, this is an excellent story being told, but isn't it letting the right determine the basis upon which we are approaching the issues? It was suggested that Maori get an extra vote and was rightly slapped down. Yes, very much so. Emma says, I think the reason why this infighting is happening so publicly with the Greens is because Shaw and Davidson, where did that go? Sorry, I'll bring it back in. Shaw and Davidson feel like they have to take accountability. Otherwise, they would lose support from Green voters. I just don't think they will. And we're going to have a look at some poll results shortly. On our conversation here, Gareth says, was Reagan the last Republican to win the popular vote? No. George W. Bush won the popular vote in his second term. So 9/11, war in Iraq, Bush won the popular vote. But he's the only one to have won it in his second term. So since, I think, 92. Which I think whoever that was.
And I think that was that whole aspect of you don't change leaders in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
And the uncharitable of us out there went, well, that's why there's a war. He doesn't want to lose.
Yeah. Labor, this is a little bit what's been talked about. It seems like maybe Labor is making policy based on what people will think, which is kind of what you've said, Chewy. Labor keep worrying about what mainstream media will say, says JK. Well, no matter what Labor do, mainstream media will complain about it.
Yes.
So do something great.
If you're going to get criticised for doing it anyway, like they're scared of changing stuff around tax or introducing a new tax because that's what National are going to criticise them on. That's what the media is going to criticise on them. Well, guess what? They haven't done it, and National are still criticising and teasing the fact that, if they get back in, they'll put in a tax. So just do it. Just do the tax. Just do the tax and let us see the benefits.
Yeah.
Build a hospital or two.
Yeah, Guru says as well, the supposed infighting on the left is largely media driven. I think that it's media enhanced. I think the media, because it's a good headline, crybaby, it's a good headline. Bullying, it's a good headline. But I do think, and I speak from experience, I guess, like I've never had the right attack me personally like the left has attacked me. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't, or I'm not saying it won't happen in the future, but the only ever aggressive sort of pile-on I've ever received is from the left. So when I say the left, I mean people who identify and put themselves in the left as left-wing activists. They are the only people who I've ever had any kind of, kind of
there's
trouble
also
with.
a danger. There's always a danger, and I see this quite often in comment sections and that sort of thing of like, typical left, the left will eat itself and that sort of thing. And this is just as relevant to the right wing as well. The right wing loves its backstabbing and spills and all of that sort of thing. But the idea of thinking of a monolithic movement. The left wing is not a monolithic movement. We all
You're right.
disagree and stuff.
Yeah.
And to the degree that we should do something, or the speed that we should do something. I think for me, if you had to distill it down, then the right wing is, we don't want things to change because things are pretty good now.
Good for them.
And then the left is like, the world is shitty and we should make it a bit better.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of why I've fallen where I'm at. I'm happy for change if it gets better. You know, yeah.
Let's have a quick short break and say thanks for everyone for jumping on board last week. Look at us. We got up to number 3 in the New Zealand News Commentary polls, ahead of the spin-off, ahead of Matt Walsh. Someone actually said that it was scary as to the amount of people that were in there. And if you zoom in, you can see that other than Leighton Smith, I'm not letting me zoom in, other than Leighton Smith in New Zealand, there's no one else ahead of us on that day at least. It does change pretty much every day. And I know, there you go, there's your one there. I don't know if you can see that, Chewy, but the one person you wanted to be ahead of, right down there at number 13.
Eat dust, Kerry Woodham.
I'm sure you're happy about that.
I don't know why I've made it so personal with Kerry Woodham, but
I don't know either.
She can eat it all the way down there.
But thanks to those, if some of you picked up on this last week and signed up, if you are going to listen to the audio podcast, you can get it on Spotify and Google Podcasts. But the Apple Podcast charts actually have some credibility to them and do actually help us out when it comes to speaking to potential media partners or getting interviews and stuff as well. So just a little advert for us to go and check us out, our audio podcast, which is just an audio version of this show. Gets released every night. As soon as we turn this off, I download the audio and upload it, and it'll be up most nights by sort of half an hour after the show. So if you're going to work tomorrow morning and you've missed out on an episode, download the audio podcast, listen to us on the way to work, and you'll get the commentary in your little ear holes as we go. So yeah, look, number 3. To be really honest with you, I don't know if you will ever knock Leighton off. I think that the amount of resource, and this is what I said in the tweet in the weekend, the amount of resource that goes into like spin-off, and I mean monetary resource, right? Time, effort, resource, and into Leighton Smith's podcast. And then there's little old us doing it sort of for the love of it, part-time, competing with them is pretty cool. And we thank you for it. So there you go. Another way you can support us is to get along to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to A Big Hairy News, #BHN. Right. Speaking of, let's it's been a good introduction to the show, this first 53 minutes, Joey. So let's go and have a look at what's happened over the weekend with Reid Research. A few of the political polls have been coming out with our mate Jenna Lynch, is that right?
Yes.
Who I found out I found out just tonight has blocked me on Twitter. Jenna Lynch has blocked me on Twitter.
What did you do, Pat?
Well, the only thing I've ever done, not even to Jenna Lynch, but tagged Jenna Lynch in, was when Newshub, I don't know if you were with us for this, might have been George last year, I've got you tagged in there as well, when they did that word cloud around their polling saying that Jacinda Ardern was a dictator and deceitful, and when you went into the word cloud, those words were tiny, and the big words were like good and caring. They chose to highlight deceitful and dictator, and I pointed that out. That's the only thing I've ever tagged Jenna Lynch in, but apparently that was too much. So Jenna Lynch blocked me. I think that might be a bit of a sign of
what a bastard. Does that mean that we're free to criticize Jenna Lynch for being the media arm of the ACT Party?
Well, I've put you in full screen so everyone can see your hat.
No, that's fair. I've been accused of making $150,000 a year. I think that's where the swag hat got delivered to me.
Well, actually, I actually, funnily enough, you might see it, I tagged Jenna Lynch in some tweets today because we were about to talk about something to do with the polling over the weekend, and I wrote this. Jenna Lynch has written in a column that, quote, Labour needs both Greens and Pati Maori to form a government. On these results, Chris Hipkins would be steering down a 3-headed coalition. That's the quote. And I said, but doesn't point out the fact that National also can't get there with just ACT, meaning they would also need a 3-headed coalition. It's almost like someone's trying to make a narrative here to paint the left bloc as messier than the right. So basically,
can I also point
both
out
parties would have to have 3 right now, but they're talking about how the left needs a 3-headed monster, but the right's allowed 3, but that'll be fine. That'll be fine, Joey.
Can I also point out that the 3-headed monster that we'd be talking about for Chris Luxon's axes of assholes would also be Winston Peters.
Or worse. That would be a good result from what the third one could be.
Like
if something
Winston
like a Destiny got in there or
Peters,
something.
The chaos machine. The elderly man that will just lash out at everything and just derail everything because he loves it. He feeds on chaos and cigars and whiskey.
Badge of honor. It's badge of honor, apparently.
Yep.
There you go. Happy about being. Says Jenna Lynch mob, all for free speech. Ha ha ha. Okay, let's get back into the actual. Because look, Jenna might want to block us and stuff, but we'll still use their content.
She hasn't blocked me. Just saying.
Oh, hasn't she?
No.
We should do that one night. Who you been blocked by? I wonder if we can research. There must be an app that says who'sblockedyou.com or something to be able to figure it out. That'd be quite fun, actually. I know Marcus Lush blocked me. I've never even connected with Marcus Lush. I don't know why he blocked me. I said something maybe once and
Marcus Lush.
Yeah.
What monster are you?
I know.
The man's a national treasure.
I know. I don't know why. All right, let's have a look at the story, shall we?
Labor is in front by the slimmest of whiskers, 35.9%, down 2 points.
This is last
National
night, yeah.
nipping at their heels,
That's it. Call it.
35.3%,
No election.
down 1.3. The Miners aren't moving at 10.8, up a smidge. The Greens holding on 8.1 despite all of their dramas. But the Minnows, Te Pati Maori, they pulled off a coup and gained support too. 3.5%, up 1.7. New Zealand First back in the game, 3%, up 0.8. Both those parties are getting ever closer to that 5% threshold need.
Which is irrelevant. Māori Party don't need 5%, but good on you.
To get into Parliament. The Chris contest has a clear winner. The preferred
Now,
Prime Minister.
This is really bad news for Christopher Luxon. Now, I'm not saying that to say that they won't get there, but this is really bad news for Christopher Luxon. Listen to what is said about Judith Collins' poll ratings.
Rankings show the public warming to Chris Hipkins. He's up on 23.4%, up 3.8 points, while his challenger, Christopher Luxon, drops to 16.4, down 2.4, his lowest score yet, lower than Judith Collins' last pre-election poll. 8.5% are keen on an Ardern return, while 7.5% want David Seymour. 3.6% are still wishing for Winston, and 2.3% want Green MP Chloe Swarbrick, while her leaders again didn't rate.
So here's another little thing that I looked up while I was talking about this, and it's this, yeah. So if you look at the left, what the percentages would be if people wanted a left-wing prime minister. So Chippy, Ardern and Swarbrick makes up about 34.2%. Luxon, Seymour and Peters makes up about 27.5%. So it's still pretty close. In fact, I mean, I got to say, being really, really honest, I wouldn't be that stoked if I was Chippy sitting on 23% either. I mean, that's only 1 in 4. I don't think that's a particularly good number for a preferred prime minister, but it's certainly, even though it's only 7 points difference, for Christopher Luxon to now be racing under what Judith Collins was, that is a concern. But do you know what, Chewy? It's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is still Luxon's likability and how the public think he's performing.
Are you the right person to lead the National Party?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Have you considered standing down to make way for someone else?
Never, no.
Never.
It's now an all-out
He's going to be there for 20
race to
years.
October 14. Everyone on the same page there.
There's no doubt it's a tight election race ahead.
There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a really close election.
Every single vote will count.
So, let the mudslinging begin.
Do you want a coalition of chaos or do you want strong, stable government?
Any national government is likely to be part of
Strong
a
and
coalition of
stable.
cuts.
We also asked, do you think the leaders are in touch or out of touch with the issues facing?
What do you think? This is not a good look. I don't want to spoil it, but for Luxon. So are they out of touch or not? Here we go.
New Zealanders, about 50% said Chris Hipkins was in touch
Not
with
bad.
their issues, while
Sausage
35.6%
rolls.
said he was out of touch. Christopher Luxon, the opposite tale. Only 37.2% thought he was in touch with issues facing Kiwis.
That's shocking
while
for a
nearly
millionaire
half,
with 7 houses.
47% thought he was out of touch.
I just say to you, I don't think I am. I think for me, I'm really...
You don't
in touch
get
with
to
what's going on in New Zealand.
decide.
Falling in popularity and relatability, Luxon is also cut off a bridge to the beehive.
I've ruled out National coming to any arrangement with Te Pati Maori.
Te Pati Maori are still revelling in their political revolution, swiping Meka Whaitiri from Labour. They're Chris maker in this poll.
It doesn't really matter what the two Chris's say because their end games are vastly different to ours.
Do you regret ruling out Te Pati Maori?
Not at all, not at all, not at all.
Careful who you make an enemy of when friends are the path to power.
Do you think that saying it 3 times might be a bit of a tell?
Oh,
No, I haven't got aces. I haven't got aces. No, of course I haven't got aces. I tell you what, though, and I asked this last week and I'll ask it again. If you are a supporter of the National Party, are you happy that he ruled out working with the Pati Maori? If it meant that you had to sit across the bench, across the House in opposition for another 3 years, would you be happy with that? Because Christopher Luxon might be happy with it, but I wonder if the people who want desperately to see National leading a government and to see Labour gone, I wonder if they're happy with it. I don't think that maybe they'd be as convinced.
Like, okay, do you think, like, I know I have my thought that someone may still try and roll Chris Luxon in the coming months. I'm going to stick with that. But here's the other question. If he does survive to the election and loses the election, do you think he'll survive that?
No,
because we've had this whole conversation of whether he's in this for the long haul.
No, I don't think he's in it for.
No,
I don't think he's in it. No, I don't think he's in it for the long haul. I think if he's not Prime Minister, he'll go. Because why would you? I mean, why would he hang around just to sit across the benches? Like he's ineffective. And I think now I forget the name of which reporter it was or interviewer it was. Someone pointed out to him. I think it was the Sunday morning show on TV3 that he was talking about, you know, being likable and New Zealanders knowing him, and he's like, "This is my job to do from here on in." And the host was like, "You've had a year, like you've had a year.
Who
you
are
haven't done it? You haven't done it in a year. What are you going to do in the next 6 months?" Another part of this research, and we're going to have a look at two parts. One is from the news last night. One is from the AM show this morning. Is talking about I've written down here out of touch numbers. I'm not sure what that means. Out of touch numbers? I can't remember it. Let's have a look. It's only for 20 seconds. Let's have a look.
Luxon's personality problems have bedded in. It's beginning to feel like the public just isn't that into him. These new out-of-touch numbers are brutal. That is about relatability. And digging in deeper, even 20% of National voters think he's out of touch. 1 in 5 of his own voters. Whereas for Hipkins, it's only 1 in 10 Labour voters that think he's out of touch.
So there you go. So that's the story from last night. We do get to move on and have a look at, they then talked about this in a bit more in detail this morning on, oh gosh, you know, we've still got things to do, haven't we? We haven't actually talked about we haven't talked about the receipts thing yet. We can get to that in a second. Well, let's just cruise into the conversation this morning about, do we need to do that? I think maybe we won't. Oh, we'll do it. We'll push play to start with. They were talking this morning more about how he's performing, how Luxon's performing, and it's, again, not a good look for them.
A little bit surprising that Labour didn't drop more in this poll. They have had a couple of weeks, in fact, a couple of months from hell. Stuart Nash.
Why do you think that's surprising, though? Like, I would question that. Why is it surprising? Because other people on the other side of this conversation might say that, yes, there were some hiccups, but they handled it quite well. I mean, they might. But someone who is, what do we say, the media voice for ACT, says, we were all expecting them to drop and they haven't really. What's that all about? You know? Yeah. So
Meka Whaitiri, all of those scandals, it just feels like
all of those
Chris
scandals,
Hipkins has been in this constant fire hose trying to get everything back under control. It has been chaotic. And really surprising that National didn't gain from that, I think. So, yes, right now we're looking...
surprised.
No, so let's ask that question, right? So this is the thing that no one ever pushes it back. Is it surprising, or is it that no one's buying what National's selling? Like, if it's surprising to you, maybe you're not a good political analyst. Like, I'm not talking about Jenna in particular, but if it's surprising, does that mean you don't understand the voter? Because if it's surprising, it either is surprising or it is that the New Zealand public aren't buying what they're selling, even if Labour's as bad as these guys are professing. If that's not enough to get National over the line, then maybe National's worse. Maybe that's the logical conclusion here, Chewy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But that question's never asked, or that thought is never put out there, obviously. It's just like, gosh, we just don't really get it. We don't really get why they're not doing better.
At the miners, we're looking at who can cobble together a coalition, whether that's going to be the so-called coalition of chaos that National is calling the left, or whether that is going to be the now so-called coalition of cuts that Labour is pitching National as.
Oh, for
So
God's sake.
how are our leaders looking? Because you've got some exclusive results for us here at AM to see how well Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon
So we'll look at
are
the
looking in
performance
eyes of
and then we'll move
voters.
on.
That's right. So we asked how each of the leaders was performing. What we do is we ask on a scale. We ask whether they've been performing well or performing poorly. Chris Hipkins performing well. 55.6% of people think he's doing well, while only 18.2% of people think.
That's brutal. That's brutal. Now, just remember, like, you can't have two narratives here. You can't have Labor are terrible, but we don't really understand why National's not getting more foreground. Those things are incongruent. Either Labor's terrible, which means National's even worse, or Labor's not too bad and National's not as good. They're the only two logical conclusions here. Both of them put the public saying that Christopher Luxon and National aren't as acceptable, likeable, aren't performing as well, aren't wanted in there as much as Labor. So either Labor are terrible and National are the worst in the world, or Labor's okay and National's pretty bad. They're the only two logical, because you don't go, Labor's terrible and National's much, much better than them, but it doesn't show up in the numbers. That's not an option you've got. People trying to make commentary on this, Chewy.
I think also one thing to say with we probably say this a little bit with every poll result. People like us love polls. People like General Lynch love polls. It gives us a little bit of blood in the water. But there is always a third of the voting base is never going to vote anyone but blue.
Yep.
A third of the voting base is never going to vote anyone but red. And then there's the third in the middle that is going to swing one way or the other depending on which way the wind's blowing. We can talk about these very small changes, and it doesn't change anything until election day. But when we start talking about questions like, do you find this person likable, trustworthy, and good at their job? That is a different vibe. And I think the most consistent thing is that Christopher Luxon's results have been steadily declining. They have never gone up. It's just down, 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 down.
Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to win. That means he's not going to be the next Prime Minister. But it does mean if the message we're getting, and I'm not actually saying this is the message, but I'm just being logic boy here. If the message we're getting is Labor is terrible and they need to go, then why is National polling so much worse? Two conclusions. Two conclusions. Either National Labor isn't that bad, they're doing all right, or National is the worst party there's ever been in politics because they're worse than this terrible other party who happens to be in government right now. They're your only two options.
You know what would be a good way to counter just being pretty unlikable in general? Is if you're consistently coming up with policy and absolutely smashing it out of the park.
Yeah.
You know, you can be unlikable and still have people going, well, I hate your guts, but you've got a point there. That's a really good policy.
Yeah.
And they haven't bought good policy. They've bought shitty ideas from the past and even worse slogans from overseas. Yeah, Chris Luxon has been hammering those phrases, coincidentally, since he's come back from the UK, since talking with Michael Gove of all people. Coalition of Chaos, we highlighted the fact that that is something that the Tories used over in the UK. And strong and stable, a fantastically ironic phrase that the Tories used as well. So, you know, we know who he's had a chat with while he's been over there.
Yep. And it's not ChatGPT. But I tell you what, you talk about bad policy and stuff,
you
mate.
You might as well run your policy through ChatGPT at this point.
I don't want to disagree with you publicly and make you look a bit foolish, but they did release some pretty massive policy today. I'm sure it's going to be earth-shattering, actually.
Welcome to Chippy's Classroom, a brand new hall at Ridgeway School.
Put your hand up if you can remember what the old buildings were like. Old and crusty.
No one wants old and crusty schools, so the government is pledging to build 300 new classrooms along with up to 4 new schools or school expansions. That creates 6,600 new student spaces.
Nice.
The price tag, $400 million.
So that more kids around the country can have the sorts of classrooms like the ones that you guys have got.
A little teaser ahead of Thursday's budget.
Welcome to Budget Week.
Christopher Luxon getting in before the busting open of the books, promising to slash spending.
And for the last 6 years, I think taxpayers have been completely abused by this government.
Now, just remember, and we talked about this last week. We talked about this last week with Sir Ian Taylor. Social welfare, the welfare group, and that includes, remember, pensions and stuff, and not working family, but pensions and disabilities and all those things. Number 1. Number 2, health. Number 3, education. Because the question we asked Ian Taylor was, what do you say to all those people who say, if I give the government my money? Oh no, this was actually to I'm not sure which one of our guests it was, but the point was made that if you're thinking about how much money the government's wasting, the bulk of it is spent on those 3 things: health, education, and welfare. So what of those things are you going to cut? Because remember, if you've got a household budget, let's say you've got $500 a week coming in and $300 a week goes on your mortgage, right? If you can cut your mortgage, you can save a big chunk of money. Other than that, you're really just tinkering around the edges. If the biggest part of your budget for a government is on those 3 things, health, education, and welfare, then what tinkering around the edges, what small things are going to disappear altogether under you as a government to actually make these savings you're professing you're going to? Or are you going to attack those 3 big things to find some big savings? Yep. That's what we need to know.
Never trust anyone that gets up there and goes, we're not going to increase tax, we're going to spend more and things are going to be better.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do all of those things. He can talk about waste all he wants. He cannot find enough waste to fund the things that he's talking about without borrowing or increasing taxes. And if he's already ruled out increasing taxes, it's big cuts or big borrowing.
Yep. All right. Now we haven't got to his fantastic. I might turn you around here, Chewy. I might turn you around once we get to his policy.
Today, he reached deep into the sensible spending idea bank and pulled out receipts for taxpayers.
And it will break down how much money they've paid and received in the last year, including any working for family tax credits or other benefit payments. And it will also break down where their taxes have been spent, including on education and health and on welfare payments.
What do you think of the idea?
I just, I want to understand how in a meeting that on whatever floor they've got, whatever office they're in, they can get together and they go, right, we need to get up in these polls a bit more. We want to gain 5%. How are we going to do that? How are we going to attract new voters to us? How are we going to actually help us get across the line here? Now, what if we gave everyone a receipt for where their tax pay? Like what's the process?
Let's brainstorm, people. Now, it's important that there are no bad ideas. What's your idea? Receipts? I said I put it on the board.
I want to see that meeting where first of all someone did what Chewy just showed, threw it out as a green light thinking, but then how it went from there into the A column, and then it went from the A column to the A1 column, and then it ended up coming out as a policy today that they think is going to attract a single new. Now remember, they need to be new people. The 35% that we're seeing at the moment, they will vote for where they're voting for. Who is that going to attract? So now rather than having to do any research, you're going to spoon feed me with a new bureaucracy that I'm going to cut after I start it up, where my tax, not my individual, but the general tax money is going, and you're going to tell me that in a letter. Yep, you've got my vote. Like I'm really trying to figure it out. I'd really like to know how that process went from idea to, hey, we've got a good one for today. Like I just want to go through that process with someone.
Has anybody ever been excited to receive a letter from the IRD? No.
And this was quite good, actually. I mean, Chippy was criticised a few weeks ago about stumbling over an answer. He stumbles over this one, but he stumbles over it because it's a stupid fucking question the world has ever had. Not from the reporter, but because they had to ask it based on what Luxon said.
What do you think of the idea of taxpayer receipts?
People can form their own judgments on that. It's kind of a bit like pledging to bring back the bank statement, really.
It sounds kind of expensive. We don't know, though. National didn't cost it.
And don't you think taxpayers will want to know how much that's going to cost?
It's pretty simple. It just comes as part of their annual tax return.
It's certainly not going to be a cost-free exercise. Someone would have to pay for those letters to be written and for them to be sent out.
Unless they get the robots to do it.
Can I just add there, I reckon AI could do it.
Yeah.
We are.
Oh my God, Chewy. So in this meeting, they've also said, "Hey guys, Chat GPT is really hot at the moment. Try and figure out where to put it in somewhere, just as a bit of a joke." And Nicola Willis goes, "Okay, hey, I've got something, guys. We could do, robots could do it." God help me.
That was mad
God
cringe,
help
yo.
me.
And I also want to subtract one of the comments that I said that Nicola Willis would be a better leader than Luxon, because that one comment, I just take a point off her. Terrible.
Yeah, and look, sunrise is sunset. Sorry, I said sunrise. Sorry, I got you in the morning sunset. Sunrise has got part of it exactly right. If Labor suggested this bollocks, Nats would go on and on about wasting money, but they suggest it, so it's all good. This is constantly
People said, who's going to do this? And he trotted out that line of like 14,000 bureaucrats in Wellington will get it done. But weren't you sacking them all?
Yeah.
So
look, something I didn't show you.
Bullshit. It's
something I didn't show
bullshit.
you. I didn't show you as well from the AM show was actually Jenna Lynch talking about what's happening with Luxon and his unlikability at the moment, is that from now on you're seeing him with other people all the time. And she mentioned Nicola Willis. So in other words, it's not just about his likability, about someone else. And she mentioned fucking Bishop. And I just thought to myself, if Bishop is the person that you have to have there to try and increase your likability, you've got more problems than just potentially losing an election. If he's the likable one out of the duo, you've got some serious problems there.
Yeah,
anyway.
You got Bishop, the Minister for Snapchat. Yeah, it's like there was a report that came out that said, what is it, $14 billion is lost to tax evasion.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to say, hey, look, there's all of these bureaucrats working for the tax department, and we want to maximize our return on our money. Weaponize those guys. Find out who's ducking tax. Get them to pay it.
Yep.
Like rather than making cuts, making a whole lot of people consultants, just get them to do a job that we've identified that there's a problem. That there are people that are ducking out on their tax responsibilities. Go after them.
If that's 14 billion and capital gains tax, they said is what, 30 billion? So there you go. We've basically just got an extra $50 billion in the coffers to build those fucking classrooms that we're saying we need to get
everyone's
people off
getting
those
a hospital.
Getting off those waiting lists and to help move the country forward into this thing that the narrative out today is like, oh, we're a backwards country. I think I even heard Seymour, I read it, say that we're becoming a big Fiji. I mean, have you ever fucking been to Fiji? I've been to Fiji about 10 times. My parents used to have a place, like an investment property over there. I've been there a lot of times. And if you've been to Fiji and you've seen houses made out of corrugated iron and taxi drivers earning $40 a week, you're either lying,
those comments.
Yeah, or you're not been there. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Hey, let's say a huge thanks to our patrons. It's been lovely to have you guys on board. Remember, if you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to support what we do, really good way to do it to help us with those charts is also to go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to us here. And other ways, if you want to get on board financially with us, like all these lovely people are, then you can do that by heading to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Genuinely, it sounds a bit pathetic, but genuinely every $5 does help. And it helps us, pay a few bills, pay some internet, keep the computer upgraded. When the camera goes down, it helps do all that sort of thing. Little bits and pieces along the way. If you want to be involved, patreon.com, as it said on the bottom of the screen, /Big Hairy News. Before we sign out for the night, Chewy, is there anything in the chat? The chat's been going kind of a bit, it's great. It's actually great. I don't mean this in a bad way, because it's been going bananas a lot for the last sort of 6 to 10 weeks. It's been fantastic. Love seeing you guys in there, but it moves pretty quickly sometimes and I miss it occasionally. And I miss it. I miss you in the weekend. But is there anything in there you particularly want to put up?
Yeah, I've got a few comments that I want to put up here.
Cool.
Stephanie here says there's a strong appetite for change, but a core mistrust of Luxon. They'll be going for a Willis bounce. I almost feel like this. Yes.
I feel like his time is up. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. National supporters who don't want Labour in will make a concerted effort to vote to the right, but the left won't be so enthusiastic.
Okay.
We've got, yay, National are going to give an AI all of my tax info.
I just can't. I can visualize. It's like, people kind of mock people doing dad jokes. If there is such a thing as a mum joke, that's what it was. We could get the robots to do it, and Luxon went, and the whole room went.
We're going back to Judith Collins' comment that if her popularity went below 35%, she should be removed as party leader.
God,
I love
was it ever over 35%?
Or maybe it was the party as a whole. I don't know,
Right.
but that
No,
35% and Judith
I think
Collins
that's right.
saying it.
No, I think that's
Yep.
right. I think if the party goes below 35%, the leader needs to go. I think that's what it was.
Yep. Simon here says, yes, a struggle, stable coalition to chaos turned out to be lies with the Conservative Party in the UK. Turned out to be the most incompetent government in the Western world. Yeah, maybe don't pillage their ideas, cabinet. Isn't it sad that we have to look to the UK for radical policies after they've been under Tory rule for almost my entire life?
Look, I think radical policies is. I mean, like, I kind of feel like you can either be milquetoast and bland and a wallflower and try and be safe, or you can try and do something transformative and exciting and inspirational. If you try and be milquetoast and bland and wallflower and you lose, how embarrassing. If you try and do something transformative and you lose, at least you gave it a fucking good crack. You know, I'm just like, I'm not
and
about
be clear
that.
on what your objectives are.
Yeah.
I don't want, not wishy-washy objectives. Like, we saw child poverty and we really went for it. And we asked everybody that worked in that space, and that's what they told us to do. So that's what we did. And we lost an election trying to do this because people didn't like what we were, because
people went fuck child poverty. They can get fucked, and they took us out. So be it.
Yeah,
it's not on us. It's on you.
Sort of echoing this and what we were saying earlier, if New Zealanders could see that their futures were secure, their super, their housing, etc., would be more likely to allow or support for higher taxation and higher brackets. Absolutely. If you want to talk about giving someone a receipt, show them that. Show them these are the things that we can do if we put this policy in. I think the Greens did it really well the other week when they said, our wealth tax is 1% on everybody's income above $150,000 a year. And if we do that, then we can pay for this.
Yeah.
And
look,
that's
I
how
tell you,
simple that message can be. Anybody that says that they don't like this policy, ask how much they make a year.
I did this. I remember actually Hone Harawira talking to him about a tax, and he was quite simple. I think it might have been people fighting in, or people peacemaking or fighting in a part of the Pacific. What's one of the countries that we fight in the Pacific? Chewie, you know the stuff better than I do.
That'd be Japan.
No. I mean currently.
China. China.
No. Anyway, one of the kind of Pacific countries where there was conflict, and we had, and he simply said, forget what it is. I'll just call it country.
Oh, East Timor or something like that.
Maybe East Timor. He goes, bring them home from East Timor, pay for school lunches. Same money. So he actually contextualized it. He went, we'll take money out of here, we'll bring them home from East Timor, and we'll pay for school lunches. So he really made it like, this is how we're going to pay for it. Very, very simple. He was also very keen on is it a transactional tax where you pay 1% on every dollar, 1% out that you take out of the bank? Because I remember talking to him about it, and I was like, so if I was on $1,000 a week and I just took it all out in cash, right, and then had all that cash in my bedroom for the week, I'd pay 1% on $1,000 once, and that would be all the tax I paid. And he was like, yep. And he's like, and they did the numbers, and they said this is how much it would be, and it would be at least as much, if not more, than what was in the coffers right now. So he had a real concrete way of doing it. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was East Timor, but let's say that's what it was. Doesn't matter. But the point I was saying with him, he says, if we take this one away, we make it really concrete. We're going to pull all our troops out of this area. The money we're spending on that is exactly what we need to feed every single kid at school lunches. So we contextualized it.
Yeah.
Easy. All right. I think we're done.
Cool.
I think we're done for today.
Thanks for tuning in for a very brisk 60 minutes, guys.
Yeah, thank you for that. We enjoyed that 53-minute introduction to the first story. Great. Remember, if you want to check out more about what we do, a really good thing to do is follow me and Chewie on Twitter. Tomorrow there'll probably be some clips that come out from the conversation tonight. The Grant Duncan one will come out at some stage during the day in its entirety on YouTube, and there may be a couple of clips from it on Twitter, so you can have either one. And we always talk about supporting us. Another way you can do it is by simply sharing our stuff around. So if the clip comes out tomorrow with Grant Duncan and you like it, then what you can do is you can share it. And then you can point people back to us Monday to Thursday. And I've seen a little bit of chat, actually. So thank you for the people who have done this. A little bit of chat.
I was just going to say that.
And us being tagged in, people talking about not being able to find good information and people pointing them to what we're doing. So we appreciate that. It's what we want. It's one
we
of the
keep
ways
on
that you
seeing
guys...
new names in the chat, which I get a real kick out of. So
yeah, and it's one of the ways you can actively support us. I get it. Not everyone wants to, which is fine, or can afford to, which is fine. $5 a month or something to help us that way. What you can do is you can be an advocate for us and tell people about us and point people towards us. It's another way we can do it. All right, I think we're done, Chews.
Cool.
Chew Meister General. We'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Stay safe, everybody. Looking forward to see you all tomorrow. And bring a friend. I want to see all of you, and I want you all to bring a friend with you. So that's a good way of
buddy
doing it.
system.
Buddy
bring
system
your buddy.
for tomorrow night. That's actually a really good advertising campaign. Buddy system. We should find out. We should get. There's a T-shirt as well. Part of the buddy program for BHN. Bring someone along with you. All right, guys. All the best. We will see you tomorrow night from 9 o'clock for another edition of Big Hero News. Remember, this week is budget week as well, and we will be looking at that through the week. And I'm sure we'll have a big show on that on Thursday night. We'll have to try and get some experts on who know about money, and it's certainly not us. I don't know about money, and Chewy knows more than me, but I don't know. We'll figure it out. All right,
money can be exchanged for goods and services.
What? When did this start?
1995.
Very good.
Not a day before that.
Catch you tomorrow night from 19. Hooroo.